Since being elected, President Obama has been talking about the virtues of our nation's potential to achieve domestic energy independence. Now, at the State of the Union message just a few days ago, he said, and this is a quote, he said, "After years of talking about it, we are finally poised to control our own energy future." Madam President, this is something I've been saying now for years. We already have control of the energy future. The problem is we have an administration that has not allowed us to exploit our own capabilities in terms of developing the natural resources that we have. In fact, we are the only country in the world that doesn't develop its own resources. The President's budget, he's proposed to kill certain tax provisions that specifically hurt, that are there, he says, for the oil and gas industry. This is not the case. Now, I'd like to mention these because no one ever talks about this. No one ever talks about the fact that it's
Senate will be in order.
That he has specific provisions in his own budget, and I'll mention just three of them. Intangible drilling costs, they're called IDCs. It's a provision that simply allows producers to deduct from their revenue the cost of drilling. Well, you know, revenue, you pay taxes on net revenue. Well, that's net of the expenses it takes to develop the revenue. Every business is allowed to deduct ordinary and necessary business expenses, and IDCs are exactly that for the oil and gas industry. In other words, the cost of drilling should be deducted because a lot of times they drill and they don't produce anything. And so this is something that everyone else has and we should be having also in the oil industry. Now, if he gets rid of this, the tax increase would be $13.9 billion over the 10-year period that we've been talking about. This is interesting because that is not a tax that would be paid by them. It would go into the increased cost of energy. Now, we stopped that. We stopped that provision from becoming a reality, but it was in the President's budget. The second is called percentage depletion. Percentage depletion is simply a way that the tax code has allowed oil and gas producers to account for the reduction in the value of their reserves. Let's say they are fortunate and they produce oil, and that's going to be income that will go to them. But as that is depleted, then that is the value, the value of that has been depleted also. And so the percentage depletion has been on the books as long as we've had the industry. And if he were successful in doing that on percentage depletion, then that would be about an $11.5 billion tax increase on the energy that we use in this country. The last thing I'll mention, there are two more about it. I just mentioned the other one. It's called Section 199. Section 199 is the manufacturer's tax deduction. It allows all manufacturers, including farmers, filmmakers, and the rest of them, to take a small deduction in their taxes because they create products here in America. But the President has always proposed to cancel this out, but only for the oil and gas industry, not for anybody else. Everybody else would have that same advantage. Again, if you were successful in doing this, it would increase the cost of energy by $11.6 billion over that 10-year period. The President's proposal to increase these taxes would prevent the industry from reaching its true potential. And this is when we talk about what we have out there that we can do and how we can get it done today real quickly. A recent CRS, Congressional Review Society, report stated that the United States has the largest combined resources of oil, natural gas, and coal of any country in the world. We have more than Saudi Arabia, China, and Canada combined. Yet we are the only nation, as I said, and the only nation in the world that doesn't allow ourselves to exploit our own resources. Now, fortunately, oil and gas activities have increased over the past years, but as much as the President may want to claim credit for this, he has no standing to do so because, as I mentioned, the tax provisions that he's proposed in his budget have been very negative toward oil and gas. Last year, we hit a 15-year high in oil production, producing an average of 6.4 million barrels a day, which it was 800,000 barrels per day more than in 2011. This increase is staggering, and it's a result of amazing advancements in oil and gas production technologies. We're talking about things like horizontal drilling, like hydraulic fracturing. These are things that have helped us do this. To get the oil and gas out of tight formations. Nearly all of this increase has occurred on state and private lands. CRS confirmed a year ago that about 96%, this is critical. Again, I've said it twice already, that we're the only country that doesn't develop its own resources. 96% of the increase that we've had, or essentially all of the increase in oil and gas production since 2007, took place on non-federal lands. That means that beyond the reach of the president's hands. In other words, he can't stop the private land production, but he can the public land. Now, adding to that, it was just released yesterday, and that's why I wanted to make this point today. Yesterday, that the oil production on all federal lands, including onshore and offshore, declined last year, the second year in a row, falling from 632 million barrels in 2011 to right at 600 million barrels in 2012. So the 800,000 barrels per day increase we saw last year took place solely on private lands, none of it on public lands. We had a reduction in this boom time that we're having right now on that which the president has control over, the federal lands. We've actually had a reduction. And this makes sense given what we know about oil and gas permitting on federal lands. It can still take 300 days to get a permit to drill. So this is something that you can't talk about too much, because they would always say, well, in a certain case you need to do it faster. It's a matter of, in my state of Oklahoma, you can get it done in hours. In North Dakota, you can get permitting done in an average of about 10 days. But no, it's 300 days on federal lands. I have a friend named Harold Hamm. Harold Hamm arguably is the most successful independent producer in America today. He's from Enid, Oklahoma. He does most of his production in North Dakota right now. And I saw just a minute ago the senator from North Dakota, and he can be very proud of the fact that in North Dakota, Harold Hamm has one huge problem, and that is he can't find people to work. They have full employment up there. This is what the potential is for this entire country. Put the chart up there, and I'll show you. This chart shows all the potential, and I call the attention to the chair of this northeastern part of the United States, Pennsylvania and New York. That didn't used to be the case where they had all that potential there. They do now. And so it's spread evenly throughout the country of all the great new discoveries that are out there. Anyway, one of the arguments that the president has had, when I have said over and over again for the last 4 years, that we need to open up our public lands for drilling, and if we are able to do this, really good things would happen in terms of the market and the price of gas at the pumps. And yet the president has always said, well, if we do that, if we allow the drilling for gas and oil on public lands, it would be 10 years before you'd feel that at the pump. 10 years. So I called up Harold Hamm. Harold Hamm is the guy that I think everyone would agree could be considered the most knowledgeable person on this area. And I said, now, I'm going to be on a national TV show. I should tell you what it is, but I won't tonight. This was about 6 months ago. I said, the president has been saying it'll take 10 years before that market to reach the pumps. And I'd like to ask you a question, Harold Hamm. I said, now when you answer, I'm going to use your name live on national TV tonight to make sure you're accurate. And so I said, if you were set up in New Mexico and you had a rig set up, and you were able to lift the restriction we have on public lands, how long would it take that oil and gas to hit the market? And he said, without hesitating, he said 70 days. I said, be sure you're right now. I'm going to use your name. He said, yeah. And he outlined what would happen each day for that first barrel of oil to actually reach the pumps and have an effect. Well, anyway, no one has argued with that yet because it's pretty well documented. So by the time you have one federal drilling permit completed, Harold Hamm could have 4 separate wells up and running, providing more jobs and cheaper gasoline for all Americans. Fortunately, the president does not control the permitting process on state and private lands, And because of this, industry has had the opportunity to unlock tremendous natural gas resources. Not 5 years ago, many believed that the United States faced a significant shortage of natural gas. Wellhead prices were at that time trading as high as $11 a thousand cubic feet. $11 a thousand cubic feet. Investors were racing to build liquefied natural gas import facilities. We were going to import. Now, as you know, in natural gas, you have to liquefy it and have some bulk before you're able to trade it internationally. Well, anyway, they were racing to try to get this done so that we'd be able to import from foreign countries our foreign supplies. The shale gas revolution has changed all of this. Now our expected natural gas reserves are well over 2 quadrillion cubic feet, which is enough gas to supply our domestic needs here in the United States of America for 90 years. That's right here in this country. Many industry observers believe this estimate is discounted to the nation's true potential. This dramatic shift in natural gas markets has pushed prices down to below $4 a thousand cubic feet, putting the United States in a unique position to bolster both wealth creation and our foreign policy, might by beginning natural gas exports. So we'd be going from importing liquefied natural gas to exporting natural gas. Right now, there are currently 15 permits to export LNG pending before the Secretary Chu in the Department of Energy. The Natural Gas Act requires the department to issue such a permit upon application unless it will not be consistent with the public's interest. Well, what could be inconsistent with this for the public interest? This is something that would be cheaper gas for us, give us total independence in a matter of weeks. Congress, when it wrote the Natural Gas Act, understood that the export of American products is good for the nation. It supports domestic industry, it creates jobs, it transfers wealth from overseas back to the United States. It's all good for us. A recent report commissioned by DOE to assist in making its determination agreed with this. They stated, and I'm reading now from the DOE report, they said, quote, across the scenarios examined by the study, the U.S. economic welfare consistently increases as the volume of natural gas exports increases. So that's the opportunity that's out there. Some in this body have raised concerns about allowing liquefied natural gas exports to move forward. They are concerned mainly that production will not be able to keep up with the rising consumption and exports. And the following on effects will be harmful to domestic industries. I can appreciate where these members are coming from, but I want to point out something that many may be overlooking. The Energy Information Agency, that's the EIA, released an annual outlook for U.S. energy markets. In the most recent one, which came out just a few weeks ago, they estimated that between now and 2040, production of natural gas would increase by 40%, which will more than offset the expected 20% increase in consumption. So our consumption is going to increase. So people say, how can we ever become independent? Because our production will increase at twice the consumption level. Now today, the natural gas is trading near an all-time low, and because of this, many producers have completely abandoned new natural gas production products. In 2008, when natural gas was trading at nearly $11 per thousand cubic feet, there were over 1,600 active drilling rigs. Today, that figure is down to 428. We've gone from 1,600 rigs down to 400. That's a 73% reduction. The rigs are still out there. They're still set up. They're just not operating. So overnight, you could have them operating again. Industry is not moving forward with projects because it does not have the demand, certainly, and certainty that it needs to do so. Without demand certainty, it is impossible to accurately forecast whether the massive investments required to develop a project can be recouped. This stalls both job and wealth creation, keeping our unemployment rates and deficits higher than they should be. But today, the natural gas market is in a demand limited scenario. and it will remain there for the foreseeable future. Supply is truly so abundant and readily available that as soon as more demand comes online, producers are able to tap the reserves and meet the market's needs. The consulting firm Deloitte agrees. In its liquefied natural gas report, it stated that, and I'm quoting now, producers can develop more reserves in anticipation of demand growth. They added that the future LNG exports will have limited disruptions to natural gas markets because they will, and I'm quoting again, and this is a Deloitte firm, they will likely be backed by long-term supply contracts as well as long-term contracts with buyers. There will be ample notice and time in advance for the exports to make supplies available. This should be of great encouragement to domestic energy consumers. In fact, the NERA consulting report concluded that across the board, industries would not be hurt by LNG exports, stating that, quote, no sector analyzed would experience reductions in employment and more rapid than normal turnover. The petrochemical industry is one that's been vocal in opposing the LNG exports, but the left-wing think tank, the Brookings Institute, stated the LNG report is, using their language, report that exports can be seen as providing a benefit to the petrochemical industry because it is primarily a user of natural gas liquids and not the dry liquids used to make LNG. Now, I can appreciate the fact that many people are worried about the cost of energy going up in this country. I am too. But those who are concerned that exports will be the cause of this have misplaced concerns. Rather, they should be focusing their attention on the cumulative effect of adverse government policies negatively affecting energy sources. Government regulations, largely those out of the EPA, are perhaps the greatest threat to this nation's achieving domestic energy independence. I'll repeat, you know, the figure that we use, we've gone down from 1,600 rigs out there that were operating down to 428 rigs. And further, when considering the potential benefits of LNG exports, we can't dismiss the impact trade has had in other sectors of the economy. Agriculture is a prime example. The federal government works diligently to open and maintain international market access for U.S. agricultural producers. This was highlighted very recently by the announcement that Japan would ease its restrictions. They have restrictions now on beef imports. Certainly that's meaningful to my state and the state of others who are in the chamber right now. But they have announced that Japan would ease its restrictions on U.S. beef imports. This has been a major goal of the current and previous administrations for years, and Japan's decision was hailed by administration and many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. Everyone knows it's a great deal because when you sell products abroad, you both generate wealth at home and expand the size of the market, thereby increasing opportunities for expansion. The federal government should adopt the same perspective with LNG exports. LNG exports will create jobs across the country and bring more wealth to our nation from abroad and grow our economy, all at the same time. Meanwhile, we'll be providing needed fuel for our allies like Japan and Korea, NATO and Thailand, who consequently will be able to reduce their reliance on the Middle East. So it's something that is good for everybody. It's good for our country. It's good for our economy. And all you have to do is look, if you want to see that, look up to North Dakota. As I mentioned, a great independent producer, Harold Hamm from Oklahoma, is up there right now, and his biggest problem is they're full. They don't have employment. They're fully employed. We have kind of the same situation in my state of Oklahoma. We've expanded our production to the point where we're not feeling some of the grief and the discussion that we hear from other people on this floor. So I would encourage us to look at this export, to keep this market, to get those other 1,600 wells working, and this is something that can certainly happen. I want to mention one other thing. I just noticed my time is expiring, but I want to mention something that came out of the State of the Union message, and hopefully I'll have a chance to do this later on today. But when the President was talking about his greenhouse gas thing that he's been talking about for a long time, he made several comments. I think that this was talked about more in the State of the Union message than anything else that he talked about. He said, yes, it's true that no single event makes a trend, but the fact is that the 12 hottest years on record have all come in the last 15. And that's just flat wrong. Even NASA's James Hansen, who officially has been the leader of the other side of this issue, is one that said he admits that global temperature standstill is real. Mean global temperatures have been flat for the last decade. Now, later on, I'm going to go over one by one the statements that he's made. I'd only suggest this, and this is something that you need to keep in mind. In 1895, we went into this hysteria, and at that time it's because there was a cold, so we're all going to freeze to death, another ice age was coming, we're all going to die. Then again in 1920, it was the same thing came, except it was another problem that they were saying was happening now, another heat spell. Well, this that obviously wasn't true at that time, but everyone was hysterical. In 1945, we had another change, and these 20-year cycles keep coming and going. You can set your watch by them, except this time, in 1945, is another cold spell that lasted until 1975. Well, the interesting thing about this is, in 1945, that was the year that had the largest release of CO2 of any time in the history of this country, and that precipitated not a warming trend, but another cold trend. And the warming trend, of course, came in 1975. Anyway, these are cycles. God's still up there. We're going to have these cycles take place, and later on today, hopefully, I want to take each statement that the President made and show that those statements just weren't right. One thing that is true, one thing that no one disagrees with, and that is that the cost of having some type of a cap-and-trade system that the President wants would be between $300 and $400 billion a year. And by the admission of the director of the EPA, Lisa Jackson, the past director, when I asked the question, I said, you know, if we were to incur all these taxes and do it, would this have something we do in the United States affect the release of CO2 worldwide? And she said no. Because the problem isn't here. The problem's in China. The problem's in India and other places. So again, for those who really believe that CO2 is causing global warming or other climate disasters, keep in mind, even the EPA director appointed by President Obama agrees that that would not reduce any CO2 worldwide. With that, I'll yield the floor.